A green turtle-shelled mascot smiles at you from a sushi menu. It sells shrimp crackers. It fronts a bank's credit card. Fans have traced its shape all the way into Pokemon's Squirtle line. Even the name Kappa has become a byword for harmless mischief, a shape borrowed for logos and cartoons since the 1950s. The old record describes something else. A depression sits at the top of its skull, shaped like a shallow dish, and it must stay filled with water at all times. Spill it, damage it, and the creature loses its strength on the spot. That single vulnerability is the one detail nearly every source before 1950 agrees on, because villagers needed to know it. They needed a way to survive the thing living in their river. In 1951, a manga artist named Shimizu Kon drew a comic strip called Kappa no Kawataro. It was a hit. Sequels followed within the year. Tokyo's own civic holiday adopted the character as its mascot before the decade was out, and a wave of commercial imitators followed close behind. The soft green tourist souvenir standing outside a train station today is not a folk memory. It is that manga, redrawn for 80 years. Before 1951, no source in the record calls this creature adorable. What that manga was built on top of runs centuries deeper, and none of it is charming. By the Edo period, the creature had already crossed into kabuki theater and woodblock prints. Its silhouette was recognizable across the country long before any comic strip existed. Toriyama Sekien drew it 4 times. His compendiums set out to catalogue every spirit haunting the Japanese countryside, published across the 1770s and 1780s. An even earlier account was set down in the province of Harima in 1754. Neither text calls this creature cute. Both describe it lurking in rivers and ponds, waiting for a child, a horse, an ox to come near the bank. That gap is the subject of this file. The pre-war record is explicit about what the creature did. It pulled people and animals into the water and drowned them. The tellings are not about mischief. After a drowning, folklore held that the creature took something from the body, an object the old texts name the shirikodama. What exactly it was, the sources never settle. Some modern researchers read the word as a folk name for the terror of drowning itself rather than a description of any literal object. The texts disagree about what was taken. They do not disagree about the drowning. The Tōno Monogatari, published in 1910 by the folklorists Kunio Yanagita and Kedzen Sasaki, recorded these accounts as living regional memory, not distant legend. Yanagita was not a folklorist by trade. He was a senior government bureaucrat who built Japanese folklore studies into an academic field almost single-handedly. He treated village testimony as data, worth preserving before industrialization erased it. 5 of the collection's 119 tales concern the Kappa directly. 4 years later, Yanagita assembled a national comparative collection, the Santo Mintanshu, gathering the same drowning and capture story from villages across the country. In 1927, the novelist Ryunosuke Akutagawa published a novella simply titled Kappa. It is unsettling by design. 2 full decades into the 20th century, nobody writing about this creature thought to make it charming. A second story type recurs across the record, structurally opposite to the first. A kappa is caught mid-attack, hauled from the water instead of the other way around, and begs for its life. In exchange, it hands over something valuable. Near the Kamanashi River, a farmer named Gosaku freed a kappa and was taught a wound-healing remedy in return. A samurai bone-setter called Unsho-an returned a severed hand for a secret of bone-setting, passed down through his family for generations. At Sengenji Temple in Fukuoka, a written pledge from a captured kappa begging forgiveness is preserved as a physical object to this day. Near the Tetsugi Shrine in Ibaraki, a kappa seized a samurai's horse at the riverbank. The samurai, called Lord Serizawa, drew his sword and cut the creature's arm off at the elbow. The arm, when it came away, still showed the web of skin between the fingers that let the creature swim. Without it, the record notes, the creature could not return home the way it arrived. The shrine standing there today carries a name that translates roughly to the Shrine of the Grafted Arm. Elsewhere, a kappa general named Kusenbo is recorded leading 9,000 of his kind across from the continent. The warlord Kato Kiyomasa drove him out. He relocated to the Chikugo River and entered service at the Suitengu Shrine in Kurume. In Kochi Prefecture, a temple's head priest spared a captured kappa. The shrine there still holds an annual festival built on that story. Even the physical description was never fixed the way the mascot suggests. At Tōno, the kappa is remembered as red, not green, a detail distinct enough that Yanagita's collectors wrote it down separately from the national standard. Over 80 regional names circulate for this same creature: Kawappa, Kawato, Kawataro, Mizushi, Komahiki, Dangam, and dozens more. That is not the signature of one folk character. It is the signature of a belief spread wide enough that every valley told it differently, and every valley told it anyway. And the dish is the detail that gives the whole thing away. A creature you defeat by spilling the water off its head is not a monster story. It is an instruction. Whatever else changed from village to village, the weakness stayed attached, because the weakness was the part that mattered. That is what makes the 1910 and 1914 collections so strange to read now. Yanagita's collectors were not gathering fairy tales from a vanished past. They were writing down what people beside those rivers still told each other. In the same decades that Tokyo was building an underground railway, the Edo period illustrators had already begun softening the creature for print. They gave it the shell, the beak, the comic edges that later became the visual template. Even Hokusai made a joke of it, but a joke drawn inside a culture that still genuinely feared the river is one thing. A mascot designed to sell shrimp crackers to children 2 centuries later is another. The distance between those two images is the distance covered by one manga artist in 1 year. Shimizu Kon did not misread the folklore. He built something new on top of it. A friendly cartoon father figure carrying the same shell and the same dish. The river was taken out from under him, and everything the villagers had needed the story for was left behind. It worked, commercially, better than almost anything else drawn from Japanese folklore in the last century. A bank still puts that softened figure on a credit card. A sushi chain still puts its name on storefronts across the country. Neither institution owes the villagers of Tōno an explanation, because neither institution is telling their story. That is worth sitting with, because it is not a story about corruption. Nothing was stolen, and nothing was falsified. A man drew a comic strip. The comic strip was better company than the thing it came from. 80 years of merchandise followed the version people preferred. The older telling was not suppressed. It was simply outdrawn. At Tōno today, the older tradition has not fully died. A man known as Kappa Oji-san still keeps watch at Kappa-buchi Pool, near Jokenji Temple. The title was handed to him a decade ago by a predecessor who, local memory holds, met a real Kappa in his youth. Tourists come for the mascot. The title he holds was not made for them. The dish on its head is still there in both versions, the mascot and the monster. It sits at the crown of the skull, waiting to be filled with water. In the older telling, spilling it saved your life. In the newer one, it is simply part of the design. The detail survived. What it was protecting you from did not make the trip. That gap did not close. It was only the one nobody kept drawing.